Hello and welcome to my video today. I'm going to be covering a smart key modification for the Fisker Ocean. Basically, you remove the PCB from the key fob and insert it into this device. And this is going to allow some neat features such as passive locking and unlocking for the vehicle, something that we've been missing since the Ocean came out. I want to thank Baroni Tomlinson and his BT Build Things channel for showing us how to modify the cover so it can fit the PCB. So let's get started. Well, here is the box for the smart key. It's a model EN920 CFM. And I've purchased a number of different smart keys over the last several months, and none of them were large enough to fit the PCB from the key fob inside them. This one is actually a little too small as well, but it can be modified so it can fit. And I don't want to cut up the PCB, since if I want to use it back in the regular key fob, I could do so. And I don't want to mess up that circuit board. One thing about this product is it is compatible with iPhone, that you can use the Find My function and search for it. So that is very handy if you own an iOS phone. So yeah, so let's open up the box and see what's inside. We have a little felt box for it inside, and here is the smart key itself. It has a screen on it and a number of buttons on the side. We have a power button and lock button, and then on this side we have a trunk button and unlock button. And it has a part here so you can connect it to a keychain. And on the back, I actually removed the cover to show you, but the PCB will fit inside here, so between the cover and inside this, and that's where it's going to be located. But we're going to have to modify this cover so that it can fit inside. So let me turn it on, and I did charge it up a little bit and set the time and the date, and you can has a touch screen interface here, and you can swipe to control it. You can go through and have a number of different settings on here. Then there's actually a settings here. You can do the time, language. So let's look at version 10.1.0.1. And yeah, so that is it for that, and has the back button right here. So yeah, so that's what it looks like when it's powered on. So you can use controls on the touch screen, or you can use the buttons on the side. So let's see what else we have in the box. And inside we have a box of a whole bunch of components here, so I'm just gonna take everything out. We have an OBD2 adapter here, and this is for the Apple Find My, and just a general, gives the ability for the fob to work with the car. So I'll be connecting that. I'm also going to be testing a USB adapter, so that if you don't want the OBD2 connector used, I'm going to see if I can connect it to USB and have it work with that and save some space. We have a USB A to C for powering and charging the device. We have a second back cover. There are two included, so if you look at them, the standard one is pretty thin, and then this is a thicker one. So I'm going to be using the thinner one, since I want to keep the fob as small as possible, but this can be a backup if needed. And inside here we have a cable harness, and this connects to the fob right in this area here. You're going to attach this, and this is the tricky part of the installation, is soldering these very tiny wires to the PCB. And there's going to be different sets of wires. I'll show you on the screen right now. Here is what the PCB looks like, and there's going to be 5 different sets of wires that come out of it. We got the lock, unlock, trunk, battery, and multifunction. I'm going to do all of those to their proper connections. However, the multifunction, I'm going to connect that to the California mode, since that makes sense. The other button that's on the fob is for the liftgate window, which doesn't work for North America, so I'm not going to be using that. However, if you're in Europe, I think that does work, and if you want to use that instead of California mode, you can use the multifunction connected to the liftgate window instead. So I'm going to have a detail of that. So yeah, on this chart, you can see that there are different color wires for each of those. For example, there's a white and a black that goes to lock versus a blue and black that goes to the trunk. We have a gray and black that goes to unlock, and we have a red and black that goes to the battery. And finally, we have the black and brown that goes to the multifunction, which could be California mode or the liftgate window. Here we have the user manual for the Apple Find My app. So that's what you'll reference. And then there's a user manual for the installation. And as you can see, it has all the steps for the installation. So here are the 2 key fobs side by side, and as you can tell, the length is about the same for both of them. The smart fob is a little bit wider, but really not that much if you look at it from overhead. And let's look at the thickness. Yeah, so not a huge difference between the 2 fobs. I have removed the cover so you can see inside. This is where you would insert that 3-volt battery to power it. In order to access the PCB, you need to lift up on this section here. It's just held in by a friction fit. So I'm just going to use a tool like this spudger and just pull up on it, and then it should come up. It's held in place by some rubber gasket around the outside. And here is the PCB itself. It is just wedged in here. So we just take that out. And here is what it looks like. We're going to be connecting the wires to the battery here. So the bottom piece is for the negative, and this right here is for positive. So we're going to connect the black wire here and the red wire there. That's the only connection on this side, and those are probably going to be the easiest since they're very large and it's not that bad to solder those on. The difficult part is going to be doing the buttons. Since we have the unlock button right here, lock button here, trunk button here, California mode button right here. So if you look, you'll see these are soldered onto the circuit board, and what we'll need to do is attach wires to those points. There are 2 points on each side of those switches, so we're going to be putting those on those 2 spots. So there'll be 2 different color wires for each of those connections. And that's going to be fun. So I'm going to try to do some soldering there. I have my soldering kit, and I did purchase some additional things such as a magnifying glass, since this is very tiny. And also I got some flux for soldering, which I didn't have before, and I found a liquid version that should work pretty well with this soldering. So I'm going to be attaching those like I show in the chart right here. As long as you follow the directions for the proper placement for the wires on those buttons, you should be good to go. And if you are not confident in your soldering skills, you could bring this to a local electronics repair shop, and I'm sure that they could easily do this for you if you show them the chart and give them all of the parts. So what I suggest doing is the power first, then doing at least the lock and unlock buttons so that you can test them in the smart fob. And if those seem to be working fine, I would continue with the rest of the buttons. And then when it's finished, we're going to install it inside of that smart fob. And we'll also have to modify that cover so that this can fit. So here is the smart fob, and we're going to be inserting the PCB in here, and it's going to be really tight. In fact, if this PCB was just a few millimeters shorter, we could have fit it inside this opening. However, this plastic underneath it is some important electronics, and I couldn't find a way of trimming the cavity on the device itself. So it's going to have to be the cover that is going to be modified. So we're going to use a Dremel tool to trim this area here and this area here so that it can fit inside. So for example, the PCB would fit inside here, and I don't think it really matters much if it's facing this way or this way. I think there's going to be more clearance if we do it this way. And yeah, so we'll be trimming this part here with the Dremel and also here so that the end point can fit in this area. So just a little bit of trimming with the tool on the cover, and just make sure you don't do too much because you don't want to take off these clasps here. These will keep it attached, so you need to have these 5 tabs here so that this can snap onto the key fob itself. So going to be careful doing that, and then we'll install it. So here we go. Here is the PCB inserted into the cover. I've trimmed it best I can, and it is sitting flush inside of the cover. And let me remove it and show you the detail here. So I had to trim quite a bit on this side to make it less shallow. And then on this side, I had to do a little bit more for the point. So as you can see, not a whole lot removed, but just enough so that it fits inside. You don't want to trim too much because you don't want to go through the shell itself, since it is fairly thin. I was very careful not to do that. So as you're doing it with a Dremel, make sure you do it just nice and slow and take your time. I ended up having to enlist the help of my friend Dave, who's an electronics hobbyist, and he did the soldering for me, and even he admitted that it wasn't fun to do at all. But I did thank him very much for his help. He did comment that it would be a lot easier if you desoldered the switches and then just soldered the wires to that. And just in case anybody wants to do that, that's maybe an easier way of accomplishing it. Just remember, you can't put the fob PCB back into the original case without the switches and have it work anymore. So it's kind of a one-way journey if you decide to remove the switches. So here we have the smart key with the fob attached. You can see the wires that are now soldered to that PCB. And I find that the circuit board in this direction seems to work better when installed in this direction with the buttons facing this cover. I found when I had it facing the other way that the switches were hitting the inside, and it was causing the fob not to work correctly. So I found this to be the best way of doing it. So now with the cover modified, we're going to put that on. And it will snap at the bottom. And then just make sure if there's any of the wires, gently push them inside so that they are not sticking out. And then what we're going to do is press all around the front and the back, and it will snap into place. So here is the front. That is snapped, and then we have the rear here, and we'll press that down. And then we are all set. So we have the key fob installed. And if you want to charge, there's a USB-C port right here. Going to connect that. And that's what it looks like when it's charging. Here is what it looks like. You can hit the on and off button right here, and we can see the display. You can flick it up to unlock it, and then you can go through the different menu options. One of the important things that I'd like to mention here is in the setup, going towards signal, they have different levels of signal strength. I found level 3 works best, and if you want the automatic locking and locking to occur at a longer distance, I found if you set it to level 6, it'll do it further from the car. And if you do it with the lowest level, it'll do it really close to the car. So I found that level 3 worked out great as far as distance. So let's do some testing. There's the lock and unlock buttons here. Let's press unlock. Now lock. We have the lift gate, so let's press that twice. Let's press it again, twice. Let's turn on the display. And we also have the buttons here, so I'll press the unlock and lock. Let's go and try out the lift gate. And there we go. So double press on the lift gate button there. And that closes. And now for the multifunction, let me double press that one. Oh, wow. So we do have California mode. But just like the original key fob, it can only open but not close. So let me just test that and see if I double click on it. Yeah, there's nothing happening because it's the same logic as the original key fob. So yeah, so very cool. You're able to use the touchscreen as well as the physical buttons on this smart key fob. In order to get the passive locking and unlocking to work, you need to have this OBD2 adapter installed in the car. And once it's plugged in, the key fob will know the distance and be able to work in conjunction to do that passive action. So if you want to attach the OBD2 adapter here, just have it in this position, and then the port is right here. So all you need to do is insert it. It makes a little sound when it is connected. And that's all you need to do for the passive locking and unlocking. If you don't want to have that feature, you don't need to use the OBD2 port. Well, here we go. We have the smart key, and I'm going to show you the distance that it works at when you walk up to the car for the passive auto unlocking. So you can see, pretty close to the car. When it activates, let's walk away. So about this distance, I would say at least 25 feet away from the car. That seems optimal for me. If you want it to be longer, you can set the sensitivity to the higher number. If you want it shorter, turn it to a lower number. Now I tested with this connected to the OBD2 port and it worked well, but now I am going to use a USB to OBD2 adapter, and I'm going to plug that into an always on USB port and see if it works the same as this does with the actual port. Here's a close look at it. This end right here is where this would plug into. And then this would be plugged into a USB-A port. Here I have the OBD2 adapter connected to that cable, and then here is the end of the cable. I'm going to attach it to an always-on power source. There it goes. So let's take the fob and walk away from it. Not getting anything. So unfortunately, I don't think I can get the passive locking and unlocking done with that USB adapter. Let's do a manual lock here. And let's get a little bit further away and come closer. And we'll try this again just to make sure. Yeah, it doesn't appear that the USB adapter is working in this case with that OBD2 dongle. I'm going to experiment some more, see if there's any alternative ways of getting this to actually work, because I'd rather have that OBD2 port open if possible. But in any case, it will work if you have it plugged into that port. So just trying to find an alternate way of powering this capability. Also, if the battery in the smart fob dies, you can still open the car and lock it with the same method that you would use with the regular key fob. So you just press it along the door handle and it opens. You could also press it against the sensor inside the car so that it will be able to drive. So now we're going to do the Find My feature. On your phone, press the Find My app, go into Device, and then press the plus button. And we're going to look for Other Item. And at this point, I'm going to plug in that OBD2 device. All right, car finder. So it found something. So I'm going to press connect. Going to enter it. I'm going to go Fisker Ocean Smart Key. So Fisker Ocean Smart Key. Continue. Let's do an emoji for it. I'm going to pick the vehicle, and then I'm going to continue. Then I am going to link it to my account and press finish, and now it's showing up. So now I should have access to the device. So if I ever misplace it, I can search for it using the app. All right, well, that's how you set up the Find My feature. Well, that's about it for my video today. I unboxed and installed the smart key fob. Basically, you have to take out the printed circuit board from the original key fob. Got to do some soldering of wires, and then a modification on the cover so that the PCB fits inside the shell. But once you get all that working, it was super simple to use. I went through the settings and customized it to my use. The biggest feature being the passive auto unlocking and auto locking, which is something that the car should have had when we first received it. If you're interested in purchasing this smart key fob, I have links in the video description. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.